Hello everyone and welcome to our virtual chemistry lab. Today we are going to be going over lab number 1, observation and experiment, introduction to the scientific method. So when you guys pull up your virtual lab report that you guys are going to be using, it's going to open up in slides. So this very first page here that I'm showing you, this is slide number 1. Some of the information in this first page, you guys are going to need to answer some of the post-lab questions. So just keep that in mind. You may need to come back to this page eventually. I'm going to skip this page for now. We're going to turn it to the next page, or slide number 2. At any point during this video, if you need to pause the video because I'm going too fast, please just hit the pause. You can rewind, anything you need to make this a little bit easier. I will try to keep the camera as steady as possible. All right, so let's flip it over to the second page. If you're doing this virtually, you will go to the second slide. All right, so let's look at the materials that we're going to be using today. So we are using calcium chloride, phenol red, sodium bicarbonate, which is also known as baking soda, distilled water, graduated pipettes, Ziploc baggies, and measuring spoons. So the idea for today, we are going to be mixing these different chemicals in different ways. Sometimes we'll mix 2 together, sometimes we'll mix 3 together, sometimes we'll mix all 4 together, and we'll see what happens. So you guys are going to be describing what happens when you see the reaction take place. So part A, the overall reaction. So you'll see here, we are going to be mixing half a teaspoon of calcium chloride, 1/4 teaspoon of sodium bicarbonate, and 1 milliliter of phenol red in a plastic baggie. Now before we get to the overall reaction, we need to do a little bit of recon, and we need to describe what the chemicals look like. So please go to slide number 3. It looks like this. It says observation and experiment, data table A. So I'm going to show you what the different chemicals look like. We're going to start with calcium chloride. In the space provided under observations, please describe what the chemical looks like to you. You can say what color it is, the shape. All right, so here is calcium chloride. So I'll try to get it where it's not so blurry. So what color is this? What do you think it looks like? Pause the video if you need to write stuff down. All right, moving over to the next one. This is sodium bicarbonate. Sodium bicarbonate. So what does this one look like to you guys? Describe the color, the texture. Obviously you can't smell it. All right, and the last one, phenol red. So phenol red we have in a vial here. Make sure we can get that into frame here. So here's phenol red. If you can't tell, it is a liquid. So what color is it? So describe that for me. All right, when you are finished describing those things, we are going to move on to part 2. All right, so I'm going to come over to Miss Blankenship. All right, so in your guys' lab handouts, under part A, so we are on slide number 3, we're mixing calcium chloride, sodium bicarbonate, and phenol red together in our plastic baggie. So here is what it looks like before we mixed. And Miss Blankenship's going to go ahead and mix for us. All right, so you can see there is a color change happening.
It's also releasing heat, so my fingers are getting quite warm.
Got a couple different color changes happening. There's some bubbles, it looks like. So any of this stuff you guys are going to write down under part A on slide number 3, where it tells you to describe the overall reaction. What does this look like? What happened? All right. So I'm going to go back to the lab. Sorry that I didn't bring this with me. So in our lab handout, we are going to turn to the next, we're not going to turn to the next page. Down here at the bottom, so right here, this is where we just wrote what happened. Miss Blankenship mixed it in the baggie and we wrote down what happened. Was there a color change? What happened with the heat? Did it heat up? Were there any bubbles, gases formed? That's what you're going to write here. Down below, it says what individual interactions are responsible for the observed changes. I want you guys to come up with at least 2 or 3 questions. Why was there a heat change? Why did it turn this color? So come up with questions or hypotheses on why you think those things happened. All right, so we are going to go to the next slide. This is what the slide should look like. It says data table B, control experiments. So we're going to go through 9 experiments. We're going to go through these pretty fast. So as we go through them, feel free to pause the video. And as you see what happens, you're going to be writing things down in the observation box for each of these. Okay? So pause the video as you need to. You can always rewind if you need to. So I'm going to go over to Miss Blankenship again. And we're going to start with number 1. So number 1 is calcium chloride and sodium bicarbonate. So she's mixing these two together. Any heat change at all?
No heat change, no liquid formation, no gas formation that's observed.
All right, so that is number 1. Let's move on to number 2. So number 2 is calcium chloride and phenol red. So here's our baggie, and she's going to mix those two together.
Okay, it's quite warm, so lots of heat is being released.
If you see any color changes or anything, make sure you write that down. If you see anything dissolving, write that down. All right, here is number 3, calcium chloride and water.
Okay, it's also quite warm. Ouch.
So it's very, very hot, she's saying. She can barely touch it. All right, so that's number 3. Number 4, sodium bicarbonate, baking soda, and phenol red.
Okay, no change in temperature observed.
So write down any colors you see, what it looks like, the texture.
Actually, now it's starting to get a little bit cooler.
So the temperature seems to be getting a little cooler, she said. So make sure you write that down next to number 4. All right, number 5, sodium bicarbonate and water.
Okay, so it's getting cooler. Okay, the baking soda, the sodium bicarbonate, seems to be dissolving into the water.
All right. Number 6, phenol red and water, so both liquids. So you can kind of see that the color, if it changed a little bit, maybe it lightened up. Number 7, calcium chloride, sodium bicarbonate, and water. So 3 things.
Okay, so I don't know if you can hear it, but we've got lots of gas formation. It's also quite warm to touch.
Look at all those gas bubbles. So very warm, lots of gas bubbles forming. If you see anything else, write that down.
Okay, so see how the baggie's even puffing up? So we've got gas formation that's filling the bag.
That was number 7. Number 8, calcium chloride, phenol red, and water.
Okay, it's quite warm.
very warm.
You can actually see the steam forming on the bag on the inside.
So there's some steam forming. Looks like the color maybe changed a little bit. Okay. And the last one, number 9, sodium bicarbonate, phenol red, and water.
Okay, so it's getting cooler. Okay, so quite cold to the touch.
So write down anything else. If it looks like it dissolved the solid that was in there, any color changes, make sure you write that down. All right, so at this point, you should have filled out this entire slide. So under all of those observations for each of those, and feel free to go back, rewind, replay any of them, but make sure you wrote down all the observations. Don't just write down one. Look at color changes, temperature changes, if a gas formed. The very last page or the last slide is your post-lab questions. Okay. Now, if you have questions, so as you go through this lab and once you've answered everything, if you have questions on these individual questions, please reach out to your teacher, either Mrs. Diana Judy, Mrs. Bonnie Blankenship, or myself, Mrs. Olivia Koleski. That concludes our lab for lab number 1, observation and experiment. Thank you guys for coming and seeing us. Have a good one.